So nice to see everybody this afternoon. Is your confidence in Jehovah? Well, I think it's important that to start the discussion off is to really get an understanding of what confidence is. The dictionary definition describes it as full trust, belief in the powers, trustworthiness, or reliability of a person or thing. So that'll be important as we talk this morning to really know what confidence is. Imagine this scene. You have two armies. You have the Israelite army to your right, the Philistine army to your left. They are getting ready for war. There's a warrior on the Philistine army side who is just fearsome. This warrior is taunting the Israelite line day and night, from morning until evening. And it wasn't just for a couple of days, it was for weeks on end, 40 days to be exact. Send over your best warrior so that I may defeat him. Well, as you can imagine, that might be intimidating for some. Well, what happened? Just to kind of give you a mental picture of why this was so intimidating, this warrior had this weaponry that was tremendous in weight. The spear head, just the head of the spear, weighed 15 pounds. He wore a coat of mail, and that's what they wore a lot of times in war times as a form of protection. It's usually made of cloth or leather, and it has a bunch of metal adjoining pieces on it. Look like fish scales. Well, this coat of mail itself weighed 126 pounds. So no doubt he was intimidating. Oh, and did I mention that he stood 9 feet 5 inches tall? Now, I'm pretty tall, but he stood a full 3 feet taller than me. So no doubt they were intimidated by this. A lot of times in today's, when we see out in the world, we see a lot of nations that have that same kind of arrogance that this Philistine warrior had. They believe in their own wisdom and their strength to govern what they do on a day-to-day basis. But what's even worse is that religious leaders are now putting their faith in some of these political entities. And that was the case here at Isaiah chapter 28, verse 14 and 15. We're going to see exactly what they were putting their faith in as opposed to God's kingdom. Now, these were servants of Jehovah, mind you. Isaiah chapter 28, verses 14 and 15. It says, "So hear the word of Jehovah, you boasters, you rulers of this people in Jerusalem. For you men say, we have made a covenant with death, and with the grave we have made an agreement. When the raging flash flood passes through, it will not reach us. For we have made a lie our refuge, and we have hidden ourselves in falsehood." Judah's religious leaders were bragging about their political alliances. So they made an alliance with a nation that was not serving Jehovah. They thought, as that verse 15 says, that they made a covenant with death, and that with the grave we have made an agreement. So they really felt insulated from defeat, that death would not touch them. But that was a hollow refuge, meaning that it carried no weight. They were putting their faith and trust in other imperfect men, just like themselves. So it proved to be not something that they could find security in. As the later says in that verse 15, it says, "For they have made a lie their refuge and hidden themselves in falsehood." So it wasn't going to prove to be beneficial for them. Well, what has been the result of these religious leaders putting faith in the political scene? Well, it's worldwide lawlessness and a lack of faith. You'll even see some religious organizations today, they're proud of being consulted by the so-called big wigs of society. But just like back in Bible times, they're putting their faith in imperfect men. And so it's clear that the nations have misplaced their confidence. What about us? Well, in strong contrast to the world that we're living in, God's servants want to demonstrate 5 traits. Now, there are a lot of traits that we want to demonstrate, but we're going to talk about 5 today. First, we want to be united as true worshipers. In the world that we're in, everywhere we turn, we're divided socially, politically, religiously. So much so, I was just watching the news probably about a week and a half ago. There was a lady from Sudan who married a Christian man. She was raised up as a Muslim, and it was so bad in the eyes of the Muslims that they sentenced her to be flogged and hanged to death because she married a Christian man. Now, if that's not divisive, I don't know what is. So as true worshipers of God, we want to be united. We want to be zealous in preaching the good news of God's kingdom. See, unlike those political ones and the ones, religious leaders who are putting their faith in political things, God's kingdom is a real solution. And God's kingdom is going to offer peace and salvation, the same things that all the world is looking for but cannot provide. Number 3, we are to be joyful. Now, that may seem simple, but today we have so much going on around us, whether it's financially we're struggling or we have some type of illness. Well, being joyful is reflecting on the God that we serve. At 1 Timothy 1:11, it tells us that we serve the happy God. And so when we're joyful and happy, we're reflecting God's personality. Number 4 is that we're careful to base our conduct and our actions on godly principles. These principles are fundamental truths that Jehovah gives us in order to make the best decision in our life. Some people, they want a law for everything, so they'll know exactly what to do, or they'll know how close to the edge they can get. Well, with Jehovah, it's much different. Let's read Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. Jehovah has given us principles in order for us to really use our thinking ability and make a good decision based off his word, the Bible. That's Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. It's going to give us a little formula that we can use. It says, trust in Jehovah with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways take notice of him, and he will make your paths straight. So, our paths can be straight according to Jehovah, but we have to do 3 things, as this verse mentions. If you look back at 5, it says we have to trust in Jehovah, first of all, with all our heart. Then we cannot rely on what we think or believe. We rely on Jehovah. And then in all our ways, take notice of him. So, by doing that formula, our paths will be made straight. Number 5 is being impartial. There are so many with different backgrounds, different ethnicity. And so we don't want to go to people and do good to people that are our same skin color, or they speak the way that we speak, or they do the things that we do. We want to be impartial towards all. So those are the 5 traits. United as true worshipers, zealous in preaching the good news, joyful, careful to base our conduct and actions on Bible principles, and being impartial. You know, one who is serving Jehovah and who isn't is clear. There should be no guessing about it. And we're going to read what causes this distinction at Psalms chapter 46, verses 1 and 3. This is going to help us to see exactly how you can tell one who serves Jehovah. Psalms 46, verses 1 through 3, says, God is our refuge and strength, a help that is readily found in times of distress. That is why we will not fear, though the earth undergoes change, though the mountains topple into the depths of the sea, though its waters roar and foam over, though the mountains rock on account of its turbulence. Did you catch the difference? A servant of Jehovah is going to completely rely on Jehovah as their refuge and strength. When I was going over this particular scripture, it actually reminded me of a song. It's an older song that really kind of goes in line with this verse. Notice what the lyrics say. If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, or the mountain should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't shed a tear, just as long as you stand by me. Now, of course, the person that we want to stand by us is Jehovah God. Because if he does that, we know that there is no enemy that we cannot go up against. If Jehovah is on our side, there's absolutely nothing. We can confidently rely on Jehovah and know that he's more powerful than any enemy. And then if we notice again in 46, the latter part of verse 1, that he is a help readily found in times of distress. Let's just say the mountains disappear, no rhyme or reason, they're just gone one day. As Jehovah's servants, we would have an unshakable confidence that Jehovah is our refuge and that it would be okay if that were to happen. So the question is that how we feel? And have we really placed our confidence in Jehovah? Well, you may be thinking, Brother Shuford, I think I have confidence, but I don't know if it's on that same level as to not being able to be shaken at all. Well, if that's the case, it's okay. How can we increase our confidence in Jehovah? Well, we can do this by looking at Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 19. We get beat up on a daily basis, having to do things out in the world, dealing with everything that we deal with. So how can we increase this confidence? Proverbs 22:19 says, "For your confidence to be in Jehovah, I am giving you knowledge today." Knowledge is the key. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the saying that knowledge is power. And that really does have some truth to it. Just on a small scale, most of you know that I enjoy cooking. So I have a background in cooking and preparing things. So my knowledge in that area would allow me to create a dish like shrimp and grits. So I'll go to the store, pick out some nice fresh shrimp, shell them, devein them if that's what I'm going to do, some nice stone ground grits, some scallions, some prosciutto or ham and cheese to put in the grits. And hopefully at the end, we'll come up with a tasty dish, shrimp and grits. The knowledge allowed me to do that. Well, what about when it comes to Jehovah? Well, with him, we're tapping into the very source of knowledge. So with that, he gives us the power to do and go up against anything, to do things that we never thought that we would be able to do. That's the power of Jehovah, and that's the source of our confidence. There's a good effect of that the knowledge of God gives that we can read at Proverbs chapter 1 and verse 33. This is how we can feel. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 33. But the one listening to me will dwell in security and be undisturbed by the dread of calamity. Excuse me. There was a Christian couple that they were going through some rough times. The husband and wife were actually working together. The husband ended up getting laid off, so that was a hit. They really wanted to display their confidence in Jehovah, so he ended up getting on the regular pioneer list, going strong. 2 weeks later, his wife had to come out of work due to health reasons. Now, a couple minor surgeries later and a few doctor's visits, they have a few medical bills piling in. Now, they went from 2 full-time incomes to 0. So they're trudging along, trying to stay faithful to Jehovah. Not too long after that, they find out that the husband's father's health is getting worse. Man, the brother is in this city, his dad is in this city. Then not too long after that, the husband finds out that his sister dies in a tragic car accident. Another blow. Well, they're deliberating, they're getting foreclosure notices on their home. They don't know what they're going to do. Well, not too long after that, they had to make a big decision. They decided to move to the city where their parents were. And you know why I know that couple had confidence in Jehovah? Because it was my wife and I. You see, we had to display confidence in Jehovah. That's why I can stand up here right now. Jehovah gets us through so many things. We have a wonderful example in Nehemiah about reliance on Jehovah. He had a difficult task to do: rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. That was a task for anybody. So Nehemiah, he is the cupbearer of King Artaxerxes, and he's trying to figure out a way how he can go down there and help the people rebuild this wall. He starts praying to Jehovah. He finds a way. He gets there. Well, once he gets there, he has to deal with some pretty interesting things. They were surrounded literally on every side, north, south, east, and west, of false religious opposers. And they weren't just saying, "Oh, Nehemiah, we really don't think you should be here." These people wanted to kill him and those workers. Nehemiah realized that Jehovah's people were in a vulnerable state. What would he do? How could he encourage them? Notice what Nehemiah said at Nehemiah chapter 4 and verse 14. That's Nehemiah chapter 4 and verse 14. He says, "When I saw their fear, I immediately rose and said to the nobles and the deputy rulers and the rest of the people, 'Do not be afraid of them. Remember Jehovah, who is great and awe-inspiring, and fight for your brothers, your sons and daughters, your wives and homes.'" How could Nehemiah just say this? People wanted to kill them. His confidence was in Jehovah. He knew that nothing could destroy the security that comes from listening to Jehovah. Did you notice what he said there in 14? It says, "Remember Jehovah. Do not be afraid." If they remember Jehovah, they wouldn't be afraid. No doubt Nehemiah was reflecting on all of the things that Jehovah had done already for his people, the things that he was doing right then. And if they remembered Jehovah, they would have the confidence to deal with these false religious opposers. And that's exactly what they were able to do. What a wonderful example for us. Nehemiah mentioned something there in that verse in 14. He said, "Remember Jehovah." And that's important for us to do as well. Not just when big things, big life events come up in our life, but on a day-to-day basis, we should remember Jehovah. And when we remember Jehovah, we'll remember to worship him whole-souled. as we're admonished to do at Colossians chapter 3 and verse 23. Let's read that scripture. Colossians chapter 3 and verse 23. That says, whatever you are doing, work at it whole-souled as for Jehovah and not for men. If you keep your Bibles open there, there's a footnote for 23, and it says soul. So here in this particular verse, it's referring to the entire person. So what does that whole soul devotion mean? Well, that means that we do all of our physical and mental faculties and our energies are directed towards Jehovah's service. It means giving of ourselves to the fullest extent possible. That's not easy, but it can be done. And Jehovah wants us to do that. Simply put, it means doing all that our soul can do. A nice way to remember, doing all that our soul can do. That's what we want to do for Jehovah. Well, I don't know that I can do as much as Sister Pioneer or Brother Faithful. They do so much in Jehovah's service. How can I compare to that? Well, the beauty of Jehovah is that we don't have to compare to it. And like with everything, if we can get Jehovah's view on the matter, it'll help us so much more. In the Bible, he gives us two contrasting examples on ones who did all that they could do. The first example was of Mary, Lazarus' sister. Now, on this particular occasion, this is taken from Mark chapter 14, 3 through 9. Jesus is in the company of Mary, and he had resurrected Lazarus. And so no doubt Mary was feeling so grateful. She wanted to display her love for Jesus. So what did she do? She grabbed a bottle of expensive oil called genuine nard. She poured it on his head, Jesus' head, and poured it on his feet. She even dried his feet with her own hair. Now, just to give you an idea of how expensive that was, that bottle of nard was 300 denarii. So that's a year's wage back then. So just imagine if you work for a whole year. Now, most people get paid every 2 weeks. You can't spend it when your check comes. You got to save it for this bottle of genuine nard. So you work for the whole year. At the end of the year, that's how you would have enough to purchase that genuine nard. But the account says that she did what she could. Well, there's a contrasting example in the widow, the poor widow. You more than likely remember from last week's lesson the discussion about the widow. Well, when Jesus was in the temple and he was watching people put their money into the treasury chests, there were rich people coming in and dropping in loads of money. It was unimpressive. They were dropping in from their surplus. But Jesus' gaze fell on a widow, and he was noticing her. She had 2 small coins of very little value. She dropped those in the chest, and Jesus, it was astonishing what he said in the account. This is the account at Mark chapter 12, 41 through 44. It says she gave everything that she had. Everything she had. Now, those 2 coins that she put in there, they were called lepta, 2 lepta. A worker back then could earn 2 lepta in 15 minutes. So to today's money, pennies. But Jesus said that she did all that she did, all that she could. Jesus didn't compare those 2 examples. He didn't say that Mary's gift was better than the widow's. And he didn't say that because they both gave their very best. They each did all that their soul could do. And no doubt for us today, as long as we do all that we can, we do our best, that's all that Jehovah can ask. And that's all that he does ask, that we do our best. And when we're doing our best, we're going to observe all of the commandments that Jehovah has laid out for us. Right now, Jehovah is still being patient towards the nations. And this is evident because kingdom proclaimers around the world are still urging all of its rulers and subjects to submit to Christ's rulership. Now, we're doing this very joyfully because we know that we're ambassadors for Christ. We're teaching people about, we're giving people a message of hope and salvation, peace, things that we don't see on the world scene right now. But there's going to come a time that we're not going to do the preaching work. Now, right now, it's taking place in all over the world, 239 lands, almost 8 million witnesses of Jehovah are out here doing that work. But we're doing this before this happens, at Psalms chapter 2 and verse 9. Like I mentioned, there's going to be a time that this is coming to an end. So this is what happens when its time is over. Psalms 2:9 says, "You will break them with an iron scepter, and you will smash them like a piece of pottery." If you've ever seen a piece of pottery hit a hard surface, it just smashes. It's not even recognizable. That's how easily and swiftly Jehovah and Jesus are going to take care of the nations who don't submit to that rulership. Now, speaking of defeat, the example that we opened with, that Philistine warrior, I'm sure you figured out that that was Goliath. And you remember who came out to meet him? David. He was a mere youth, a shepherd boy. Now, how in the world could this mere youth go out to defeat this giant? Now, there were military people on the Israelite side, but this shepherd boy came. Well, he came with the name of Jehovah. He had confidence that Jehovah was going to give him the victory. Goliath was taunting Jehovah's people, and David wasn't going to stand by and let him do that. So he confronted him. And he didn't confront him with a big sword and a shield and the same things that Goliath had. He had a slingshot, a couple smooth stones. And that's what defeated Goliath. No doubt. Today, we will face some Goliath-like obstacles. If you haven't faced them yet, just wait for it. They're going to come. But what Jehovah is telling us is that with him, there is no